Hey, what's up? I'm Rafael de Furia, aka Rafi D is me, and I am back at it again on another beautiful Friday night. This week, today, if I've done the math correctly, 10 days until 10 years that I left America. And I've never been back, not even one time. And that's probably the thing that people are most shocked about, that over these 10 years, when I tell them, oh, it's been 5 years and I've never been back. It's been 7 years and I've never been back. Like, how is this possible? I can't even imagine this. And it's like, yeah, this is just my life and how it's gone. And in this video, I'm going to talk about some of the things that I've experienced, that maybe things have changed or things that haven't changed. Later on in the video, I'm going to answer a question that comes directly from one of you about kind of integration now that I'm here in Italy. But before we get too much deeper into the video, if you would like to see more content like this about moving to Italy, Italian dual citizenship, and living life abroad in general, please be sure to subscribe with that notification bell turned on. And if you could also give this video a like, I'd really appreciate it, as it does help out the channel. And if you'd like to help out the channel another way, please be sure to share this video with your friends across social media or through email, WhatsApp, however you guys keep in contact. And of course, if you would like to help make more videos like this possible on a monthly basis, you can go to rafaeldefuria.com/Patreon. Or if you'd like to help out just once, you can go to rafaeldefuria.com/support. And so for those of you who don't know, this is the country that I'm from. That's the country that I currently live in, and can imagine that I would be here for quite a long time. But going back to what I was saying before, I've never been back to America since the day that I left. Why? Just because I didn't need to. Did I ever want to go back to America? Yeah, there were times. The first few years were the most difficult. There were times that I wanted to go back, but it wasn't financially an option to go back. I left at the age of 17, just about to turn 18, and now I am 27, just about to turn 28. And it's a trip and a half. And I've been on a trip and a half as well. A lot of ups, a lot of downs, a lot of growing up. There have been certain things that would maybe be unusual parts of growing up and getting into adult life that I guess are a little bit different when you're abroad, but there are things that I'm sure that are exactly the same. And people say, oh, you must really hate the president, or you must hate this, or you must hate that about America. And it's never been about that for me. It's just that America was where I was, and I had seen quite a bit. Are there more parts of America that I would like to see? Sure, I would love to. I'm not saying I'm never going back. It's just that I don't feel that pull to come back. And I hold absolutely no ill will. I think it is an amazing country. There are imperfections, but I do think it is overall one of the best places on earth. But I can say I'm very happy with where I live now. And I would prefer to be here, and that's why I am here. And my 10 years overseas hasn't all been spent in Italy. I would say only since 2017. But I've been coming to Italy since I was a kid, and so it's not like Italy was totally unfamiliar to me before I came here. Do I regret leaving America? No, I don't. Were there moments where I did? Maybe in very difficult moments. There's been moments where I've thought, would it have been easier if I had stayed back in the States? And I think there are certain things that for sure would be because of language. English is my native language, and America was the system where I had grown up in. And so I would have been able to more easily navigate certain things. But now at this point in my life, I've been gone for so long, and basically my whole adult life, not basically, my whole adult life. So there are things that if I were to go back now, I would have to learn from square one. And even I do think that if I went back to America, I would be in a bit of culture shock. That actually happened the first time I left America. When I got back, I was in complete culture shock. It was a very strange thing. And that was only for just a very short trip, maybe a couple of weeks. But now having been gone for 10 years, and especially with how things have changed in the States, I think for sure I would go through some culture shock. And do I consider myself American? Yeah, I'm American. There's no question about that at all. This is what I am, and this is who I am. I can't change anything about it. There are maybe other times where I don't feel as American as some other people, and where there are certain things that have become foreign to me. And there are times when I do feel like a foreigner amongst Americans when I've spent time with them. And do I feel European? Do I feel Italian? It's just, I'm me. I'm Rafi D. Rafi D is me. I am American, but I have this European influence, and then I have all of these other influences from these other places that I've been. So, like, if you would say that there's a foundation or a base for anything, yeah, I'm American. I mean, listen to the accent that I speak with, although that's actually that I have to actively be thinking about what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. Sometimes I have to be actively thinking about what accent I'm using and to make sure that I'm not changing my accent in any way. I've listened to myself, old recordings of myself, and I've noticed that there has been a change in my accent. And also there are times when if I'm speaking in another language and then I switch back to English, I might speak with a slight accent for like a minute or two in English, and then it goes back to what you're hearing. But even if I'm speaking in another language and they're using like a term from English, then I use the accent from that language there, just because it's a shift. It's like, I don't know, think about a typewriter. Like there's this kind of, I don't know, when you're speaking in different languages, these different muscles that you use in different ways. And so if I'm speaking in one language, it's just easier for me to use those same muscle shapes than to change between the two different registers, I guess you could say. And I will not forget the date, because it just so happens that I arrived at my first destination, April 1st, and yeah, I can say that starting a new chapter of your life on April 1st, I mean, I'm not necessarily so superstitious, but April 1st might not be the best date to choose to start that new chapter. And going back to the idea of, do I miss America? Yes and no. Like, I miss it. Like, it's where I'm from. Like, I have a lot of great memories from my life growing up on the West Coast. And even when people have asked me in the past, just in conversations, oh, do you ever plan to go back? Or do you ever plan to return? And it's no, I can't say I have any plan to move back to America or to go back for a vacation. In my life, I'm looking to move forward. But I can say for sure that I don't have any plans to live there. But would I visit? Maybe. I do have some family that I would like to visit there and that I would like to see, because it's been a long time. But I would say the parts of my family, the more immediate part of my family that I'm more in contact with, everybody's already left America already. I have family here in Italy. I have family all across the world. More and more of the family is kind of leaving the country. But that's also when we're talking about that our family, or all of my ancestors, were immigrants to America to try and provide a better life for their descendants, me and the other living members of my family. I'm grateful for that, because them making that choice gave me the choice to be able to do what I want to do in my life. And I've even heard people saying, oh, you going to Italy is just throwing everything in your family's face. I don't see it in that way at all. I've spoken about this before, about being Italian American, the differences between Italian and Italian American. What does it mean to be Italian? I've spoken about this all in previous videos that you can go watch after this video. If you go to my YouTube page and go to the video section, there are a number of videos where I talk about this. And for me, it's nothing to do with any kind of way of insulting my ancestors at all. I mean, for me, actually, one of the reasons why I left and why I not was inspired, but why it was just kind of not such a far stretch, was because, well, if they did it, why can't I? The time when my ancestors left their homes, this would be a much more difficult point in history to leave your country, potentially never speaking to or hearing from your family ever again. But now in 2019, I mean, you pick up your phone and it's like, oh, hey, how's it going? Like the person is down the street, but they're really on the other side of the world. We live in an era where we are so much more connected than we've ever been before. So even though you may not be able to go and have dinner, have lunch, have a coffee with your family members, you still can be connected to them. And I'm quite fortunate that where I live, I have family that's not far from me, so that I can have those interactions. And that has actually been one part of living abroad that has made things much easier, because if you're moving abroad alone, there's a lot on you. There's a lot of pressure. Even if you do move and you have family that's also moved, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. there's a big transition, and each different country you go to, well, at least that's been my case, where each different country I've been to, I've moved to a few new countries a few times, and each time I've started out my life, and I'm at a point in my life where I'm kind of over starting my life over. So that's one of the reasons why I can see myself staying in Italy longer. It's not because like I'm just settling for Italy. It's because Italy is actually where I was planning to come the whole time. It's just because of my paperwork and the whole Iure Sanguinis thing and citizenship was why I ended up going to different places while I was waiting to have the ability to come be in Italy. It's just things took longer, but I'm glad things happened the way that they happened, at least in most cases. I mean, I'm not going to say the past 10 years have been perfect. There have been perfect moments, though. There have been a few. But quickly getting into the question that I was talking about earlier, I think this is actually a good time to talk about it. A regular viewer named Joe asked a question on my Facebook post that I recently put up just a picture of me and happened to ask this question. Silly question for you, Rafi. I'm going to tell you, Joe, right now, it's not a silly question. From your neighbor's perspective, are you and do you think you will always be the foreigner the government can print and be as official as a native-born citizen? Technically, through Iure Sanguinis, I am a native-born citizen. Technicalities here. But to them, do they still think of you as the foreigner, or do they welcome you as one of their own? Just curious. So this again goes back to something that I've spoken about in previous videos about being Italian American, living in Italy. And this is a subject for sure I'm going to talk about again in the future. I think I can't remember the name of the video, but it was a while back, something along the lines of what does it mean to be Italian? That was either the thumbnail or the title of the video. I can't remember which, but I can't think of the video off the top of my head, but it's one of those videos with something along those lines in the title. And there are a few videos like that. And I would say that no matter where you go, you are always going to hold your first country as part of your identity. Even if you try to get rid of it, even if you try to disassociate from it, even no matter what you try to do, you on the inside will always have that as part of you. Whether people recognize that or not, that's the question. For me, I mean, wherever I go, I'm the American guy, and I'm okay with that. I mean, I'm the Italian-American guy. Like, for example, where I live here in Alto Adige, the majority of the population here are actually of Austrian descent. And so people here have said to me, oh, well, you're more Italian than I am. And so I was like, okay, that's actually interesting to think about. But like, they were actually born in this country and they speak, and many of them speak Italian as a native language, or they grew up speaking it. And my Italian is still far from perfect. Working on it slowly, but also living in Alto Adige has made it more difficult to improve my Italian. But that's another story for a different video. But I would say among people in Italy who are of Italian descent, do they consider me and other people like me as one of their own? I would say on some level, yes, but again, you'll still always be on some level the foreigner. But whether you're accepted or accepted in one way or another way, what does it really matter? I mean, I think it more matters that your friends accept you for you, who you are as you are, or your loved ones, whatever it may be, your family. But there will be people here in Italy who will just say, oh no, you're not Italian. You can't be Italian. You weren't born here. So you could never actually be Italian. And for me, like, honestly, at the end of the day, I don't really care what people have to say in that regard, because I know what I am. I know what my roots are. I know what my last name is. Oh hell, I know what my last name is. And if you've been watching my videos regularly, you know my last name as well. Di Furia is actually my real last name. And that actually also leads to interesting interactions sometimes. I've traveled around Italy or met new people and they hear me trying to speak Italian. I don't necessarily speak with such a thick accent, but you can tell by the way I speak, I'm not a native speaker. And people have said to me, how do you have an Italian last name? Like, how is this even possible? I've met people who can't comprehend that a foreigner could have an Italian last name. And it's like, well, my family kind of had to come from somewhere. And that's also a difference between growing up in America versus growing up in Italy, where a lot of people who are from Italy have Italian background, whereas basically if you're from the United States, nobody's actually from the United States, like at least not in their background unless you're Native American. That's a different story. Is that even still a politically correct term? I don't know. This is actually another thing about having been gone for so many years. I've seen a lot of things change in America. Like, I noticed that there's been this big, huge shift in what you're able to say and what you're not able to say, what's politically correct and what's not politically correct anymore. So there are even times when I'm with other Americans and there's that little bit of disconnect. And even though I didn't leave that long ago in the grand scheme of things, there have been times when I've been with other Americans who have left more recently. I would almost say cultural divide in some ways, but it's not that it's a cultural divide so much as it's more, I left America at a certain point in its history, and that's the America that I know. As time progresses, culture changes. And so the US that I left is not the same US that exists today. And I'm not saying bad, I'm not saying good, I'm not saying it's worse, I'm not saying it's better, I'm just saying it's different. That's just simply the fact of the matter. And so kind of going back more to the linguistic side of things actually, but going off in a little bit of a different direction, my ability to speak English I wouldn't say I'm losing my English, but I do often feel like I am losing it. Very often I catch myself forming my sentences incorrectly, or even I'll be watching one of my videos back while I'm editing it and like just listen to what I'm saying. I'm like, wait, what? Hold on, what did I say? Just the sentence structure, or even maybe word choice that wouldn't have been the same word choice that I would have made maybe 10 years ago. It's because when you're not living in a place where your language is the main language, you start thinking a little bit different. Again, not better, worse. It's just different. It's because of the linguistic influences around you, and in those languages, sentences are formed differently. And I speak a few languages. Not going to say I speak any of them perfectly, but I can communicate basic things in those languages. And even though I may not speak them perfectly, there are times when I'm speaking in English and I'll catch myself trying to remember, how do you say this word in English? Or maybe because I've lived with more British people around me, how do Americans say a certain thing? Because there are some big differences between British English and American English. And very often when I'm speaking to American friends, or even when I'm making my videos, I have to actively be thinking about making the right word choice, or to not use a word in a foreign language, or to not use a British word, because the majority of my audience is American and not British. And so there are times where I have to be very conscious of what I'm saying and my word choice, because there are times when I would be more likely, I mean, this is a bad example, but I would be maybe more likely to use the word trolley instead of cart, or lorry instead of 18-wheeler or truck. Or even for different fruits and vegetables and foods, there's certain words that are just, I reach for them much faster than I would the American word, just because I had more exposure to that word in a certain context, like for example. And so there are times when I'm trying to even think of the name of something, and very often, like with I can never remember this word in English, pineapple. Instead, my brain automatically goes for ananas or abakashi. And that's just because of the places that I've been. Those are the words that I've used more often. And even like when I'm speaking to some of my family, especially if I'm getting on the phone with my mother, we both speak the same languages. So it's very easy. If I'm trying to explain something to her, I don't have to think about the language. I can just say the words that I know generally. And so what's very common is that we will have this strange kind of communication. The sentence structure may not be perfect, but because sometimes you have words in other languages that are much more direct than what we have in English. And so one of us might start the sentence in English, move on to another language, move on to another language, move on to another language, come back to English, move on to another language, and then finish the sentence off in English. And that's just the way that we communicate, just because that's what's the easiest thing for us. And if you're wanting to hold on to your language, that's probably one of the worst things that you could do. It just happens to be that one thing that I end up doing in my life, just because this is just how it is. And that's one thing that has changed a little bit from America. Although growing up, there were times when words from other languages were injected into sentences, but not like in the way that we do now. So that was something that was always normal to me, but it's increased significantly. And again, it's not because I speak any of these languages perfectly. It's just because some of these words at times can be easier to reach for. And so that, going back to what I was saying before, very often I realize I'm making not the best word choice when I'm speaking. To get my thoughts across written is much easier for me because it gives me time to think about the words that I want to use. Whereas these videos, I don't script anything, I just speak. So that's why if you hear me making mistakes or forming my sentences strangely, or even if my accent drops, it's because this is something that can happen to you after living abroad for a while. Kind of going back to what I was talking about, when I've been in conversations and people have said, would you be ever interested to go back to America for a vacation? And I've had opportunities to go and take a quick job out there, to do a gig for a few months, for a few weeks. And I've ended up turning them down just because it's been more of a hassle to take that on and then come back to where I am. And I'm looking for more new experiences rather than revisiting old ones. There might be people who would argue that may not be the best choice, but for me and the way that I'm living my life and the way that I want to live my life, it's what makes the most sense to me for moving forward and, again, not moving back. I've had wonderful opportunities to go to different places. I mean, like, when you get outside of America, the world is very different. North America especially is this little bubble in its own little world. It's this continent all alone between the Pacific and the Atlantic, and not a lot of interaction with other foreign countries. Yes, America gets involved with other foreign countries, but not in the same way that is necessary, for example, in Europe, where many countries are in a tiny, tiny, tiny little place. If you were to drive the distance from, say, Seattle to Portland, you could go through in Europe easily 3-4 countries in that same amount of distance. And not just 3 or 4 languages, but multiple languages and multiple dialects of those languages, potentially. And so the world almost, at least Europe, when you're in Europe, it feels as though a lot more things are much more accessible. Like, if you want to go to Croatia for a weekend, you can do that. I've done that before. Like, years ago, I was traveling around and I was in Italy briefly, and I was like, oh wait, I have enough time that I could go to Croatia. I'd never been to Croatia before, and I had kind of been curious to go. I happened to get a last second deal to go to Dubrovnik. I was in Dubrovnik. It was just as simple as that. And there was another time I was working for a production company and they said, oh, we have to go to Poland for the weekend. And so I was like, okay. So we went to Poland for the weekend. And that's also one of the contributing factors to why I haven't been back to the States. Because if I say, okay, a plane ticket back to America, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. If you get lucky, now you're able to find some deals for like $300, $400. If you fly via Iceland, you can get some really crazy deals. Nowadays, this is something that's much more new. But if I have $300, $400, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, I would be more interested in maybe seeing something new, something different. Having a new experience, trying some new food that I haven't tried before. Food is also one of those things. When you're living abroad, you get to experience very different things than you might normally get to. And even if you're in a place like, say, New York, for example, and you're trying food like ethnic food or foods that are from different parts of the world, they will be foreign inspired, but because when you travel to different places, the ingredients do differ. You might not get the exact same flavor in New York as you might get in Krakow, or the same flavor that you might get in Lisbon. There are certain things that do change, but it could even be just one of the background notes of the flavor, not even the main flavor itself. If we're talking about dairy, for example, if you've ever had Russian chocolate, or if you've had Brazilian chocolate, or if you've had Swiss chocolate, or if you've had American chocolate, they all have a slightly different flavor because the cows all eat slightly different things. Also, okay, the ingredients do change, but if you eat Russian chocolate, I've never been to Russia, but I've been exposed to some of their sweets, and oh gosh, they know what they're doing. And if you have these Russian chocolates have a shared flavor. There's like this body, I don't know how to explain it, but it's this kind of family of flavors that is all very similar. Or if you have Brazilian chocolate, there is that flavor of chocolate that's from Brazil. It's just its own thing. American chocolate, it's a very unfortunate tragedy. No, I'm not going to say anything so bad, but like, I'm not such a huge fan of American chocolate. I have had good American chocolates though, but if we're talking about kind of overall, and that's also another thing though, I do enjoy American cuisine, burgers, American style pizza. I know, oh, you live in Italy and you like American style pizza. Yeah, I like it. It's a different thing. Pizza in Italy is different from pizza in America. I could say that one is better, and if I were to say one is better, it would be Italian because the quality is generally much better. But I do like a good, greasy Pizza Hut pizza. And I know there are people that would be horrified that like, oh, how could you? And it's like, I like it. What about it? I do me, you do you. And I think that's just kind of how you have to live life in some ways. You got to do what's right for you. There are times when I do miss American food, but luckily being American, it's not too difficult to find American style food. Not necessarily the same foods exactly, but you can find American inspired sometimes. I mean, even one of the best burgers I've ever had in my life happens to be from where I live here in Merano. There's a burger place that does great burgers. They're different than an American burger, but they're probably one of the best that I've ever had. But there is still something about a good, greasy, like diner burger that's just been cooked on a griddle, that hasn't been cleaned in a while, that they've just put way too much oil on it. And it's just, there's something about it. But there are places, because there are so many Americans that travel around the world that want that American taste. There are places you can go, even here in Italy, that cater to the American palate. There are even places that are popping up, I believe around Vicenza, where they have the American base. There are even restaurants that I've heard of that do like American-sized portions and Italian-American food rather than Italian food, like where you could actually get fettuccine Alfredo with chicken on top. Pasta Alfredo doesn't exist in Italy, not by that name, but you can find places that do a pasta dish with a cream sauce. It's not exactly the same as Alfredo, but there are places you can go to and it is like a thick creamy sauce like Alfredo. And there's still a lot of people that say that Alfredo doesn't exist in Italy, but it kind of does on some level. But I digress. But also when we're talking about food, my taste has changed. I don't enjoy things that I did when I was back in America. There's something to be said for your taste changing as you get older, but even I remember not too long, maybe 3 years after I left America, that I had been able to find root beer for the first time. And root beer back in the States was like one of my favorite things. I loved it. Root beer float. Whew. And it was the same brand of root beer that I would get in America. Just, it wasn't any kind of like foreign copy. It wasn't the same. I didn't get that same enjoyment of the flavor that I had previously. As time has gone on, I find that when I've found like little American candies or little things that I don't enjoy the flavors, they're too sweet, or they taste too unnatural, or they taste too something, I find myself appreciating the more subtle flavors that you often find outside of America, especially in Italy. Some of the subtle flavors that are not too sweet, or even when you go to a German bakery, you can taste the baked goods and not just that overly sweet icing too much. But there are certain things which I do miss that you can't necessarily find so easily, like Mexican food, or, well, I guess I should say Texican food, because Mexican food in America are a little different. Although I do also miss proper Mexican food too. And that's something that's often very difficult to find when you're outside of North America. And the few times that I have seen people try to replicate it, I remember one time I went to a taco place. I forget what country it was in. And I got a burrito, a couple tacos, just simple. And it was the equivalent of, say, $20 for just like simple Mexican food that you would go down to your taco truck and spend maybe $3.50, $5.50. I mean, I remember getting burritos for like $1, like a place that does good, bad food. And so there's that level of authenticity that does get missed. But anyway, this video has probably been a bit longer than usual. And just before I wrap things up, the 10 years that I've had so far, I can say has been very interesting. And I'm quite curious to see what happens over the next 10 years. And do I know where I'm going to be, what I'm going to be doing? I have a rough idea of where I plan to be, but in life, you never know what happens. Do I plan to go visit the United States? I don't have solid plans. I'm not saying no, but I'm probably would be more likely to see other places first. Like, for example, I'm also Brazilian, but I've never really experienced Brazil other than for a short period of time when I was a teenager. So I have a good flavor of what Brazil is and what Brazil tastes like as well. And I do look forward to going back there one day. But at this time, I feel like I still have a lot of exploring that I need to do more locally here in Italy. And at this point, Italy is for sure my priority, and to see more of this wonderful country and what it has to offer. I've done enough of going around the world, and this is actually one thing. I feel very fortunate in my life to have been able, at such a young age, to been able to have seen so much. And I'm at a point in my life where I feel like I don't necessarily need to go on these adventures anymore, because I've had the interesting fun being in a dangerous place and that kind of stuff, having to run for shelter from rocket fire. I've done that. Like, I mean, like that's happened. Like, I'm done. I'm okay to kind of quiet down a bit. I'm at that point. I'm not an old man or anything, but I feel like I've done and seen basically everything that I want to, other than more of Italy. And any adventures that I get to have the opportunity to do around here in Italy, I for sure will be sharing with you guys. Anyway, if you would like to see more content like this about moving to Italy, Italian dual citizenship, and living life abroad, please be sure to subscribe with that notification bell turned on. And if you would like to take an active role in helping to make more videos like this possible, you can go to rafaeldifuria.com/Patreon to help on a monthly basis. Or if you would like to help in another way to make videos like this possible, you can go to rafaeldifuria.com/support. Or for shirts, mugs, baby onesies, and more with pizza, pasta, and amore, and other designs, you can go to rafaeldifuria.com/NYAG gear. All of the links are down in the more info section below. And as always, thank you for joining me on another beautiful Friday night. I am Rafael Di Furia, aka Rafi D is me. I look forward to seeing you all next Friday, and I hope you all have a great weekend. Later.